Okay, so a bit of an update here on the associated 89 Stealth build. I do have the rear section done. Last time I just showed one side here with the B4 CVD and the B4 style rear hub carrier with some offsetting here of the axle, so that way you get no dog bone bottoming out into the diff out drive. So this is functional, right? On both the left and right sides, it seems to work fine. Now then the question was, for me, whether or not doing this and attaching B2 rims here with the offset that you get with B2 rims would give you the same width as you are supposed to have with the stock build, right? This is the stock build where you have this sort of standard RC10 rear hub carrier, and you have these CVAs here, or not CVAs, universals going to this Yokomo wheel hub and these dish Yokomo wheels. Now, as it turns out, I can't quite show you here with this setup, but essentially this ends up being wider if you have B2 rims mounted to this pin here. So what you end up having to do is to use something more like a B4 rim, or well, this happens to be a low-C rim, but it's essentially the same offset. Or, if you have B5 rims with a wheel hex, you can put a wheel hex on here. This will pull the outer surface of the wheel back in and get you about the same width as what you have here. Which, I was it's kind of good news for me either way, because if I can run B2 wheels on this, then I have B2 rims with tires already mounted. If I could run B5 or like Kyosho RB6 wheels on this with a wheel hex and still get the right width, that's also great because I have a lot of wheels with tires mounted on those. One of the main reasons I didn't want to do this is, even though these are cool, is I'd have to get all new sets of tires for these rims, and on top of that, I'm frankly not so sure about the long-term prospects for this universal joint here. I don't know whether this steel that was used for this is a high quality steel and whether these universal joints will end up breaking. And I'm just not too crazy about finding out at the racetrack. So if I had to get new universal joints, that's more money. Not that money should really be an issue here, but I'm just not so certain about this, right? Team Associated, for better or worse, they're known for using, let's say, cheaper components that aren't necessarily known for their reliability. So I would much rather go with something like this, where I have a CVD that's a bit more reliable, and mounting it with, in this case, it turns out it'll have to be a wheel hex with RB5 style or a B5 style wheels. Now, if I'm being totally fair, because of the bearing trick I had to play in here, there is a little bit of play here. You see that within the wheel axle, okay? And you get a little bit on this side too, right? It's not perfect. There's a little bit of wobbliness here. And part of the reason for that is because you don't have bearings on opposite sides of the hub carrier. They're all kind of smushed in on one side. And there's enough room there for things to kind of play around a bit. So the wheel axle isn't anchored quite as sturdily as it would be if you had bearings on opposite sides of the hub carrier really holding that axle in place. So I really don't know how this is going to do with the bearings, and if this is going to put undue stress on the bearings themselves during hard racing conditions. We'll find out. Let's see, there was another thing. Oh, right, another thing I need to mention here that I do need to address is I have to grind out a little bit of the bottom of the hub carrier here to make clearance for this little cup. You see this little plastic white cup here that encompasses the pin that would go through the universal joint here. At full droop, it ends up hitting the rounded portion here of this hub carrier. So I think I do have it sort of shaved off on one side, but you're going to have to get like a Dremel grinding bit and just round off the if I flip it over, maybe it'll be a little easier. And let's see if I can get a pointer. You're going to want to round off the inner surface here of the hub carrier where the this pin mounts through. Okay, so that will make enough room here for clearance for this cup section here of the CVD, so it doesn't bump up against that. Because if it does, you'll see it more on full compression. This will try to sort of pop out. And that on its own, if it's running, if you're just doing statically like here without it running, is fine. But this thing's going to be spinning very fast when you're racing, and then that's going to grind up against that hub carrier there. So you do have to grind that out a little bit just to make room for that. So that's something I have to do. I almost forgot that I had to do it because I was preoccupied with some other stuff lately. But make sure you do that. The other thing here, and I've been reading a bit about this with the 89 Stealth. This doesn't have much rear toe-in. As I understand it, it actually has 0 rear toe-in if you build it factory stock. So that's another advantage of using the B4 style rear hub carriers. You can get them with 1/2 degree rear toe, which gives you a little bit something. There is a guy who is offering files, 3D CAD files for these inner arm mounts that have different amounts of rear toe-in, which is very cool. So you can 3D print this part here to get some tuning options. Personally, I'd rather see if somebody can make some machined inner arm mounts that have 3 degrees of rear toe. That would be very nice. Otherwise, if I were to 3D print them, I would probably print them in PA11. That's probably the best material to use. It's more durable, more sturdy than your typical PA12 material. If you go back and look at my Laser ZXS Evolution builds, you'll see that. I make a lot of references to that. So yeah, that's kind of it for the moment. This build isn't really going anywhere for a little while because I got to build the shocks, and I want to give my son an opportunity to build these shocks so he can have experience building shocks for the first time. I don't know when we're going to get around to that, so until that happens, this is just going to kind of sit here. So yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.